this year. So let's start off with a word connected to the Erev Rosh Chodesh, going into Elul. So we have here, this is from the page of the Masana Tokef. So we have the phrase of Tshuva, Tfilot, Stoko, Ma'avirin, Esreya, Hagazera. And on top of those three words of Tshuva, Tfilot, Stoko, we have the little words Soim, Koil, and Momen. Now, this is well known that this Momen is Gematria 136, as is Koil, and as Soim. They say all those three have the same Gematria. The significance of them having the same Gematria, this is already mentioned in Rishonim, in late Rishonim. I've seen it in Hagoas Minhogim. You've got Minhogim of Oron Kodesh, and he mentions this, the parallel of Soim, Koil, and Momen. Then in passing, I saw quoted in, as I mentioned last week, I think, I've been reading the memoirs of Rabbi Saul Jacobson, and on one page he quotes this word, which I'm going to repeat now. This word, after a bit of research, I found that this word was said by Shamshon of Ostropol. Shamshon of Ostropol was about 400 years ago, probably. Brilliant Goyen. It's like his writings are full of amazing gematria. Unfortunately, he was killed. Al Kiddush Hashem. He might have been in the pogroms of Tach B'Tat. I'm not sure. I think it was around then. So he points out the following: we have a pasuk in Tehillim, Ishbar lo yedo, u'chasil lo yovin esois. The ignorant person will not realize, and the fool will not understand this. So he says the following. We've got the Tzom Koil Mom, and each one equals 136. Twice 36, twice 136 is 272. Ba'ar is 272. Ishbar lo yedo. So if a person is missing of the three inyonim of Tshuva, Tefillah, and Stoko, if he's got one of them, either Tzoim or Koil or Momen, so that's one level. Is missing Bar Lo Yedo, is missing 272, two of those inyonim. So he's missing some very important stuff. Then you have Chsil. Chsil is a fool, is worse than a bar. Lo Yovin as Zois, he's unaware of Zois. Zois is Gematria 408. 136 times 3 is 408. So Chsil Lo Yovin as Zois, he doesn't have any of the three. Doesn't have neither Tzoim, nor Koil, nor Momen, neither Tshuva, nor Tefillah, nor Tzedakah. So that is a Chsil. On the Rav Shamshon Astropol, this is what Rabbi Saul Jacobson brings. In the various places where I saw this, they say that Bezois Yovei Aron El HaKodesh, that Aron, the Kohen Gadol, enters the Kodesh HaKadoshim with the Zois. So again, he uses the same gematria, the Zois, 408. 408 is the power of Tshuva, Tefillah, and Tzedakah, Tzoim, Koil, Momen, all those three qualities coming together. Bezois Yovei Aron El HaKodesh. Okay, so that's a nice word which I saw. I wanted to share it with you. And so now, Shabbos, I was walking on the street and someone stopped me and he asks me, made of wheat, and he's got a wheat intolerance. Therefore, he wants to make a mochi and have a little crumb of his lechem, but then have other. but he doesn't. He looks like he's using regular challahs. He wants to know whether he can have a little bit to be yotze and have other. So there we go. So we have here I said to him that comes the night of Pesach. So when you give out Lechem Mishneh, the balabais makes hamotzi with the 2 matzahs, 3 matzahs. How much you give out to other people around the table? He doesn't have a kazayis for everyone. So just relying on just a little bit, and the rest, okay, so this actually we have here from the Pisket Shuvas in Simonei Shain Dalet. So he's writing here, when there's many mishtatfim, many participants, for whatever reason, it also can be enough to give a little bit of lechem less because it's and the rest we from other job. So here, this is a question from a refugee camp somewhere in Europe, and they have a Sefer Torah. And now the halacha is, if you bring a Sefer Torah to another location, you have to treat it with respect. You have to create a respectable place for it. So for this, they were quite, I think, resourceful, and they got hold of in English, I think it's called an ottoman, and it's like it's a bench of sorts, and they've taken this and put it on its side, and they're using this as an Aron Kodesh. So they're asking 2 questions. Respectful. Two, they will quite a clever idea. I think it is respectful, and they're using this talus obviously as a pareches. On the other hand, once they've finished, I don't see a problem of them leaving it for the hotel because your property. So therefore, they let you use it, but you cannot consecrate something which isn't your property. Therefore, I didn't see that's a problem that they should then leave it. I'm going to go on to the next question. I apologize for the poor sound. I have applied. I have applied for a upgraded, a faster broadband, and hopefully by next week it will be faster. I apologize for the nuisance, the way it's messing around. Let's move on to the next question, and this was a and they have now Baruch Hashem into a new base have in there, which is a safe. Now, generally, the halacha is that with a disused Aron Kodesh, it needs to be put in genizer. They would guess the best way would to dismantle it and put it in and bury it. Here, with a safe, that's going to be a much harder thing to do. And so they're asking, is there a solution? So it's something very interesting, and again, it's Ketshuvas, where he writes the following, that some poskim say that if it just wants more, I'm going to switch off and switch on the whole shiur over again and stop messing around. Okay, so there we are. So what they're saying is that when you say that it is sacred and you cannot change it for anything else, it's only if it's possible that someone else will use it for Sefer Torah. But things like which cannot, they're not. There's no intention for them that it cannot be used for another Sefer Torah, so to speak. Well, so in other words, things like bells and things like that, you cannot say now I'm going to sell them for other use, because they are clearly just for Sefer Torah. But things which can be used for other things, so then the assumption is that even when they were consecrated, it was only consecrated for the time that they will be in use, and after that, after they're no longer needed, they will be sold for mundane things. So the poskim do allow selling this safe. If it cannot be used for Aron Kodesh, you could sell it and use it for something. For something else. Let's move on to the next question. Here's a question of some of the warehouse, and they have a roof here which they only go up to the roof only for maintenance purposes and don't use the roof for anything else. Is asking two questions. Does here, which has been put up for legal reasons, we know that a flat don't need to have. Well, let's read the Alter Rebbe's Lashon more carefully. What does Alter Rebbe say here? It's a mitzvah to make a mark around your roof, and then he says that's only for a dwelling. Beis HaKnesses, or Beis HaMedrash, or Beis a house, a stable, does not need to have a marker, but he explains it's not normal to use the roofs of these premises for regular use. That's why our roofs are exempt from marker. So if the sloping roof is exempt from marker because it's not commonly used. And so he's saying clearly the same thing with the Beis HaBokor, with the Beis HaOitzer, that in warehouse is ein regilus to use the roof for a market for use, and therefore it's exempt from the din of market. Because then, on the other hand, though, if it would be a chi of market, so you looked around, is the din of market the din of shmira, the din of mechitza? But pashtus, you'd say it's din of shmira, of protection, and this railing which we've seen, I think it does serve as a protection. But if you say it's a din of mechitza, that the Torah has given a chiyuv to put up a mechitza, so this doesn't count as a mechitza because it's got such large gap. So I say it's not chayiv b'markeh, but it would be markeh. This wouldn't be adequate. Let's move on. Okay, so last week this came up a discussion about davening mincha just before shkia and davening ma'ariv after shkia, and someone challenged me a little bit about this. And I'm going to read the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll come back to the psak of last week. So this is in Siman Reish Samach Zayin, where it talks about the Kabbalas Shabbos, and he says the following: there's even those who daven ma'ariv bismano, in other words, after dark, after the Tzesek Chavim, a whole week. On Friday, you can daven Friday evening. You can daven mincha. You can daven ma'ariv, from Plag HaMincha. Why is that? So we have a machlokes in Gemara between Yehuda and Chachamim. And Yehuda says that the time that the cutoff of mincha and the beginning of ma'ariv is from Plag HaMincha, which is an hour and a quarter before the end of the day. So what Alter Rebbe is saying, that although generally it says that you shouldn't skip around one day like the Rabbi Yehuda. Again, the Gemara says in Psak, the Ovid Rabbi Yehuda Ovid, the Ovid Chacham Ovid. You can choose to follow Rabbi Yehuda, you can choose to follow the Chachamim. The way it's written in Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Lamed Gimel, you shouldn't be chopping and changing between one day and the other, one day like Rabbi Yehuda, one day like the Chachamim. Notwithstanding that, when it comes to Friday evening, then you are allowed to follow Rabbi Yehuda, although the whole week you've been following the Chacham. That's what they're saying here. Even though the other day, at this time, now other days you're davening mincha. So you are giving two conditions. That's not a problem for Friday evening. Why is that? Because there's a mitzvah to daven ma'ariv to Shabbos from the week. So that's why it's allowed. Then the Alter Rebbe says, "Elo shetzorichu lizohe shelo yispal mincha boi beyoyim atzmoi acha plaga mincha shelo yase beiskolos asoises zoyeze bizman echad." On Friday, if you want to daven ma'ariv early, that's good, but you have to daven mincha earlier before plaga mincha, because otherwise you're davening mincha like so we have here this week. This week I see that Plaga Mincha is 6:30, and Licht's is 7:50 or something like that. I mean, Shkia is going to be at 8 o'clock. So now here's the question: he wants to daven mincha, let's say, at 7:30, and daven ma'ariv at 8 o'clock. So once you're ready daven mincha after 6:30, you're following the Chachamim, that even after plaga mincha, you can still daven mincha. So you like until which is an hour and a quarter of the day. We have a concept of shor zmaniyos, where we take the day and divide into 12 parts. Each part is an hour. But when does the day start and end? So there are two schools of thought in this. There's the Mogen Avraham and there's the Alter Rebbe and the Grom, approximately the same, the Levush. And that is, one approach is that you count the day from dawn until Tesek Chavim. That's a longer day. Or the other opinion is you take from sunrise to sunset. And that's what the Alter Rebbe paskins, that we follow the day for the hours, for dividing the 12 hours, is from sunrise to sunset. As a result of this, you look in every luach, you'll see that the sof zman krishma of the Alter Rebbe is approximately 36 minutes later than the Mogen Avraham. That's because of this question of start the day and end the day for counting shors. Mogen Avraham's man of shor zmaniyos is plaga mincha is an hour and a quarter from Tesek Chavim. Now, from Shkia to Tesek Chavim is daled million, 4 times 18, and that's 72 minutes. Plaga mincha is instead an hour and a quarter, 75 minutes. So the difference between plaga mincha, 75 minutes before Tesek Chavim, and Shkia, which is 72 minutes before Tesek Chavim, is a very small difference. Indeed, Rabbi the reason why Yehuda says we don't pass in that way, and we pass in plaga mincha, and we're taking plaga mincha, as I said, is going to be 6:30 or something, because we're dividing the day from sunrise to sunset, and that makes plaga mincha that much earlier. But there certainly is an opinion in Halocha that Plaga Mincha is just a few minutes before sunset. If so, at Stanford, contradictory opinions, because there is an authentic halacha view that this is where the dividing line of Plaga Mincha is actually between the two tefillahs which you just downed. What's interesting is that the Alter Rebbe doing here that the Mognait from Mincha into Ma'ariv, which is pretty much standard practice in many Ashkenaz shuls. They daven Mincha, or Sephardi shuls also probably, but they go from Mincha straight into Ma'ariv. Ad kedei kach that Nusach Ashkenaz doesn't say Kaddish before Baruch Hu by Ma'ariv. And the reason is because they just said Kaddish at Mincha. At the end of Mincha said Kaddish. They don't make another Kaddish before Ma'ariv. So this is quite a widespread thing, and the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring that, which is interesting, which would obviously mitigate this whole question. Does the Alter Rebbe bring it mentioned a very Rebbe introduced a new way of making the knives for the shchit a much smoother knife, because it's going to cast aspersions on previous generations where they used the heavier types of knives. Says that's not a problem, because it's okay for a kehillah to take on new chumras. And he gives two examples. He says about people being more careful about chodosh, and he says about people being careful of late of davening ma'ariv bismana. Possibly there was a change here. When people live in a more rural setting, much harder to come back, or more practical for people to come back or for Ma'ariv, or to stay on for Ma'ariv, to go home after a little, once it's dark, perhaps because of the change of lifestyle. So anyway, the Alter Rebbe says that people of late are being more particular to daven Ma'ariv bisman. That may be why the Alter Rebbe drops this heter of the Mogen Avraham, that it's a heter to daven Ma'ariv right after Mincha, because otherwise you won't get the minyan together. Okay, let's move on to the next point. So the next question is, and we don't have a slide for that, is there, what's the story of a Jewish doctor a late night for a neural concept of trusting a tradesman that they're not going to ruin their reputation? That's mentioned in various contexts. I did not find that in the dinim of Yichud, and therefore there is here an issue of Yichud. How is it going to solve this problem?
Rabbi Raskin, maybe you should disconnect and connect again, because it's terrible the whole time.
In a window, that is, it does. Pardon?
Maybe you should disconnect and connect again. It's not possible to hear anything.
All right.
It's being interrupted the entire time.
Interrupted?
Yeah, the whole time it's interrupted. No, the connection is very bad.
Okay.
Very poor.
Right. So I'm going to, all right, Shkoyach, I'm going to switch off, and I'm going to restart the machine, and give me about 3 minutes, Bez Hashem. Okay? Thank you for your input. Bez Hashem. Here, as a new talked about using a doc. Let's move on. Question. Someone asked me a question, very interesting question, about you, but you it says that you're not allowed to wash yourself with cold water and then bathe near a fire. Sorry, and then warm yourself near a fire, because that means you're warming up the water on your body, so you're bathing with warm water. So he asked the question, this book asked the question, if so, here's the question of walking on the floor heating, you warming up the water.
Still the same.
Really,
Dayan, you have the same problem.
It's not working.
Than just if it freezes well, possibly by the underfloor heating to go chile. Shabbos was more. How do I unmute myself? Oh, I'm not on mute. Huh? Okay. So there we go. That we have here a letter, a couple of answers of the Rebbe. In the case of a father Jewish, mother Jewish, father not Jewish, that there may be a question of gates. Now, and the Rebbe in this place, he gives a reference in this letter, he gives Ayin Gamkein Pischei Tshuva Even Ha'ezer Siman Dalet Sif Kotten Aleph. He refers us to the Pischei Tshuva in Even Ha'ezer. So I have that in front of me. You can look it up yourself later. In Pischei Tshuva in Siman Dalet, he quotes here that the Goin of Lister, that's the Chabad House, he felt that based upon the Rashi in Kedusha Samaches, that when a child is born from a non-Jewish father, there is a need for Gedus. And he says that a Goy has got yichus, the idea of fatherhood, lineage. A Goy has lineage, like an Eved does not have lineage. And when the child is born from a Jewish mother and a Goyish father, he still has a lineage to his Goyish father. When he goes through a Gedus, then he will be disconnected from his Goyish father, and then he becomes a full-fledged Yid. But until then, there is a need for there's a need for games. So there is this opinion, and probably what the Rebbe is suggesting here, the Chumrah, one should do a process of Gedus, in this case, to make him a Yid l'kulei alma, according to all poskim. What struck me very amazing about this psak, and if so, this would raise a question of doing a bris on Shabbos for a boy whose mother is Jewish and father isn't. According to this Chumrah, one wouldn't be allowed to do the bris on Shabbos. Let's move on to the next question. Someone sent me a chaladish. Send me a picture of a chaladish which has got in gold it's got written, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam hamotzi lechem min ha'oretz. So it's got in gold lettering stuck onto this challah dish, Hashem's name. Now, Hashem is written Yud Yud, but Elokeinu is written properly with a hey. And so now, are you allowed to use this dish? So what I'm seeing in contemporary Sforim, that if you did have Hashem's name written on a dish, you wouldn't be allowed to use that dish. It would be kind of make the whole dish sacred, and it would be inappropriate to use that dish. It would be like a status of shames. Another question which came in this week is a shliach somewhere in one of the islands, in one of the Mediterranean islands, and he's asking, it's the first time he's there for Shemitah, is it okay to use esrogim from Eretz Yisrael to bring import esrogim from Eretz Yisrael for his community? So now the esrogim from Eretz Yisrael will have the din of Shemitah. Is it allowed to export Shemitah? So there's one issue which is bichlal of that's Kedusha suffice, but there's a separate thing that there is a Isur Rabbanon to export Shemitah produce over to out of the country. So that which you buy in the market here, you can buy in England, you can buy a lot of Shemitah stuff. That's a violation of the dinim of Shemitah, because they shouldn't be selling Shemitah stuff overseas. Going back about 150 years ago, there were the pioneers in Eretz Yisrael, and they were planting esrogim, and they, if they would not be allowed to sell their esrogim overseas, they would not have parnasa for a year. And they were very, very desperate about this. It was very difficult times. And so they asked the Rabbanim at the time, who said that the reason for not exporting Shemitah produce is so that there should be ample provision of food for the people in Eretz Yisrael. So if they're going to start exporting, there's not going to be enough locally. So here they say, but in this case, is an exception to this rule, because if they're not going to export the fruit, the esrogim Eretz Yisrael, then the Eden Eretz Yisrael will not have what to eat. So on that basis, the Rabbanim at the time, let's say 150 years ago, did allow the exporting of Eretz Yisrael esrogim to Chutz La'aretz because of the desperate situation of the parnosa for the Eden there. So coming back to the practical answer, is there a basis to export Eretz Yisrael esrogim? There are mekilim. Is it ideal? And the answer is no. Actually, if you can manage without it, that would be recommended. One last question for today, and that is that someone asked me yesterday, 2 days ago, that the word Elokim Achedim, which is the beginning of today's parasha, and this man is not a Lubavitcher. He picked up a Lekutei Sichos of this week's Sedra, and it has there the word Elokim Achedim spelt with a kuf. And he questioned that. He says he's not totally surprised. In the Noam Elimelech also it has Elokim Achedim written with a kuf, but he's asking why. Why, if it's Avodah Zarah, so we said we don't want to say Hashem's name in vain, so we say Elokim with a kuf instead of with a hey, out of respect. But if it's Avodah Zarah, there's no need to respect Avodah Zarah. So why is it not? Why shouldn't we say with a hey So this question actually was addressed by the Rebbe in, you can find it in the Lekutei Sichos, volume 24, page 453, and he writes the following. In response to your question, it is common practice, the Olam, there's the Hamish Olam, would say Elokim Achedim in reference to Avodah Zarah, and they would say it with a kuf, even though they're talking about Avodah Zarah. Ve'ulai yesh lekasher in Pirush HaRamban, Dvorim 21:22, Kenan chulu shechoshash chulu. The Rebbe says perhaps the reason why, even for Elokim, for Avodah Zarah, we use the term Elokim Achedim rather than saying with a hey, is based upon the Ramban. So I looked up the Ramban, which I'm going to share with you. It's on the pasuk of the din of if a person had been hanged, put to death by hanging,
So then it says, "Loisolin nivlosei al ha'etz." Do not leave the dead body, the corpse, hanging from the tree. Tikover tikberenu bayomahu. You should surely bury him on that very day. Ki kilalas elikim tolu. Because the disgrace of Hashem is hanging. What's the end of the pasuk? You shouldn't defile the land. On this, the Ramban has got a long discussion, but he refers to Rashi mentions about two people, two brothers. One is a melech and one is a gangster. And the gangster was caught and he was hanged. But the king is disgraced because his parallel, so to speak, is disgraced. So the disgrace of the parallel is a disgrace for the king. Now, there's a story in Sefer Yehoshua where after they made the pact with the people of Givon, then a number of nations, number of kings in Canaan, Eretz Canaan, got together to attack the Yidden. They attacked Givon, and the Yidden protected Givon. So there's a whole battle, and Yeshua led them in the battle, and they then captured 5 kings of those armies. They were trapped in a cave, and then they were hanged. And then Yeshua said, "We're not going to leave them hanging; we're going to bury them." So on this, the Ramban comments, "It's min halav hazeh kova Yeshua malchi Canaan beyoimon." It's because of this, because of this love, Yeshua buried the kings of Canaan then. Although it's got nothing to do with disgrace of Megadef, they hadn't said anything against Hashem. It's nothing to do with that. But it was got to do with Lotumas Oretz. As it says, but here's the next point, which I'm going to try to explain. Oy shechoshash lekilalas elikim min hamoshel shel shnei ha'achim. Or that he was concerned that it is a disgrace for the Eibishter, like the moshel of the 2 brothers. So what is the Ramban is saying, that the mitzvah of burying rather than leaving hanging is, even though that person is a Rosha, but because he's got a counterpart who's not a Rosha, therefore don't disgrace this one, because it shouldn't have a disgraceful impact on the one which you want to respect. Possibly this is what the Rebbe is saying here, that to use Elikim Acherim in a disgraceful way for Avodah Zarah, but that would somehow possibly filter and also be used, the name Elikim, disrespectful even for the Eibishter. And as a result, when it comes to Avodah Zarah, we don't say Elikim with a hey, we say it Elikim. So in other words, when it's got to do with Dayanim, I don't know. When it's got to do with worship, so what's being said here is, don't use the term Elohim with a hey in a disrespectful way, because that would have a bearing as if also when you're referring to Hashem would also have a degree of disrespect, and therefore it remains. We say by Avodah Zarah, we also say Elikim Acherim. Okay, that's the what I have to share with you tonight. Bless Hashem, next week we should be up and running better, and I wish you all a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh and a Ksiva v'Chasima Tova. Thank you for bearing with us all this time.
Thank you.